Okay, so hi, I am Professor James Bennett. I am the Director of StoryFutures and the Story Trails project that you are here to hear more about. And we are super excited to have you here because we've never had so many people showing interest in one of our programs. We're really excited to tell you about what Story Trails is going to be and how it's going to work and what the opportunity is for you to be a part of it, because Story Trails is a project that is about creating immersive experiences that bring history to life where it happened across the UK. But the most important part of that is that it needs you out there to be part of it to make the experience come to life. We've got incredible partners, including the British Film Institute and the BBC. We've got Niantic, we've got Nexus and ISO Design, Produce UK, and the National Reading Agency as part of our team, who are going to make Story Trails a really national moment for understanding where we've been in order to understand where we're going. To give a little bit of context about what the Story Trails project is and how it fits into a festival of creativity in 2022, I'm going to play a short video from Martin Green, the director of the Unboxed program that Story Trails is a part of. So let me play that for you now, and we'll talk a little more about what we're going to do in the session.
Story Trails will bring together augmented reality, new developments in 3D internet technology, and young creatives to shape one of the most ambitious people's history and archive projects ever undertaken. Story Trails is a unique storytelling experience that will bring to life untold stories from the past, stories of belonging, and stories that will reanimate our public spaces, seeking to inspire a UK-wide conversation about who we are and where we're going. Town squares, local libraries, streets and cinemas will be transformed into virtual portals through which to explore stories of historical change in 15 locations across the UK in 2022, and of course through broadcast and digitally. The Story Trails creative team will work closely with communities in each of the towns to uncover unknown, surprising and intriguing stories from the past. Today, the Story Trails team begins recruiting 50 paid people from the next generation of UK creative talent who will work closely with individuals and communities to unearth the hidden stories of each city and town. And you can find out more again on unboxed2022.uk. Story Trails is led by StoryFutures Academy, the UK's National Centre for Immersive Storytelling, which is part of Royal Holloway, University of London, and the National Film and Television School. It's delivered in partnership with the British Film Institute, broadcaster and filmmaker David Olusoga, Applicants Television and leading immersive specialist ISO Design and Nexus Studios, and like so much of our programme, the BBC. It will be brought to life in the Reading Agency's national network of libraries and by event-making specialist Produce UK.
So that's a little bit more about what Story Trails is. We're going to try and put a bit of flesh onto the bones of that as to what the experience means, particularly for the 50 creatives that we are recruiting to be part of it. So importantly, today's webinar is about the opportunity we have for our, what we call our trail makers, our creative practitioners, who we're going to provide with a kit of parts to work across the UK in these 15 locations to bring history to life in these new ways. And there are two specific kinds of experiences we're looking for creatives to build with us. One are what we're calling augmented reality trails. And our friend and partner, David Bradshaw from Nexus Studios, is going to talk through what that means. The second is called our Immersive Maps, and I'll be back in a minute to talk about what those are and how they work. But let's deep dive into the AR trails with David from Nexus. David, over to you, mate.
Thank you, James, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm just going to share my screen, so hopefully that's going to work without any technical challenges. hopefully you can all see this. So I'm going to talk to the mobile AR story trails, as James said. I'm going to kind of break that down into 3 parts. I work for Nexus Studios, so I'm just going to give you a very quick introduction to who we are and what we do. Then I'll talk about the mobile story trails, what they are, and then what part do you play in this process? How would we work together? So starting from the top, so Nexus Studios, we are founded in London, based in London, but we also have offices in LA and Sydney. We do things all film, animation, real-time production. I work for the part of Nexus Studios called Nexus Interactive Arts, and we're dedicated to all things XR, so virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual production, anything to do with kind of like the intersection between art and technology, really. We've been in this space for a while and really interested in what we're calling enhanced locations. So how can we take real world locations and enhance them with the use of augmented reality? This was one of our first projects in this space, and this was where you could kind of punch in any location in the world and you'd have this virtual character called the hot stepper, and use that as a kind of route finding mechanism to kind of take you through your space, and it would react and respond based on the location that it was in. We then kind of moved on to working with cultural institutions. There's a palace in South Korea called Changdok, I hope I pronounced that correctly, where we can enhance that location with kind of storytelling and virtual characters and volumetric capture. So that was a virtual guide to the palace using your mobile device, and then you could interact with all these fun things along the way and kind of take part in various different games. And then we moved on to working with the Dallas Cowboys and created this stadium-based experience where you could see giant life-size characters of the players outside the stadium. You could play halftime games with virtual players against other people in the crowd. So it's all like super interactive. And that is to say that we've been kind of thinking on this issue for a while, is that how can we take real world locations and use digital technology to kind of enhance that location through storytelling. And that kind of brought us to this project, the Story Trails project. So what are AR story trails? So what we're aiming to do here is basically create a portal through time. You know, this is all about like the wonder and the magic of time travel. How can we take you from the present day into the past with things like virtual portals? So as you can see here, this is an example of something that we create in the 15 towns and cities across the UK where this project features. And you can kind of walk through time into the past. Like to the partners on this project are the BFI and the BBC, and we have access to all that fantastic archive. So we're thinking about creative ways of like, how can we take that archive and enhance those spaces? So this is an example from a prototype that we built in Brixton. Is like, what fun things can we do with archive? What different ways can we treat that? So one example would be we can create these old kind of vintage TV sets and put archive in there. We could project it on the side of buildings. We can, you know, all these different things that we can do. So it's about contextual storytelling in the towns and cities that we're going to. And what we're doing is building a framework. So we won't be creating those stories. The stories will be created by you. So we're busy building an infrastructure and what we're calling a kit of parts for you to use to tell these stories. So here's another way that you could experience archive, for example. As I said before, we can kind of project archive on the side of buildings. So what it gives you the opportunity to do is to kind of tell hyperlocal contextual stories. So if, for example, this footage had been filmed inside this building in Brixton, we were able to project that on the side of the building in augmented reality to give you like an insight, give you a window into what it must have been like at the time period in which it was filmed. we're able to do this using Niantic's technology. James mentioned Niantic before, Niantic, the makers of Pokemon Go. So we're using something called visual positioning technology. And what that means is we're able to place things in a very, very accurate way using this technology, so that we can say we want this to be exactly on the side of this building, or we want this to take place exactly in this town square with a real high level of accuracy, unlike GPS technology, which is somewhat of a precursor to that, which is not so accurate. So using this technology, it means that we can tell real kind of hyperlocal contextual stories. I mentioned the kit of parts. Here is an example of this kit of parts that we're building. So say, for example, as a creator, you wanted to use a quote from an inspirational person in history, and you wanted to have a kind of life-size cutout of them in the street in Brixton. We're building that infrastructure so you can kind of pick the bits of the kit of parts that make sense to you in order to tell your story. Again, like, what other things might you want to use? Photo-based archive. So imagine these big kind of tactile, oversized film canisters in the streets where you live, and then you can kind of tap on them and it will reveal a gallery of images. How can we engage the communities? What does community contribution look like in these stories? So we've come up with the concept that we're calling a hope note, and it's where you can send a note of encouragement to yourself and to others in the future, so that once you're able to type that in, you will then see that manifest later on in the story trail. Here's an example of what that might look like for the user. And here's an example of what that might look like once you've entered that hope note. And then this is like a communication to your community, and it's kind of interactive, and we're able to determine how people feel and think in response to the stories that you're telling. So it really is kind of, it's part of the community engagement project, let's say. Another thing that we're thinking about here is voice notes. Like, how about leaving a note to yourself in the future? So this is a little bit more intimate, but for example, is there anyone in your life that you think of as a natural leader? You can record that as a voice note, save that for yourself, and then it's in response and in stimulus to these stories. Again, this is an example of these kit of parts. So this is just a small snapshot of the guide that we'll create, that will be available to you for you to work alongside us, so that you can make these kind of creative decisions to tell your stories. And that kind of comes on to how we'll work together. So we're really busy making this guide at the moment, examples of what these stories might look and feel like, but then it's really over to you to come up with the stories that you'd like to tell based on the archive that is available to you from the BFI and the BBC, using these kit of parts to tell your story, and we're here to kind of help you make that. And we're really looking for stories that mean something to you and mean something to the communities that you live and work in. So yeah, we're really excited to work together, and I'll be around for the Q&A. Thanks, James.
Thanks, David. That's really great. It's such an exciting part of the project, and working with really cutting edge technology. But as we'll make clear when we do more of the Q&A, really putting that technology into your hands, even if you've never experienced augmented reality before or worked with it before, you don't need to know how to work with this stuff at the moment. We will be running a training program to enable you to work with these technologies. I'm going to move on now to the second creative output that we're looking to build with your help. David, your screen's still shared, mate, so I'm going to cut. And here we go. So hopefully you can see my screen, which will say ISO Design on it. So our partners ISO Design company with us this afternoon. So I'm filling in for our lead there, Damien Smith. ISO Design are based up in Glasgow, and are one of the UK's leading design companies, specialising in interactive installations, particularly in cultural heritage, visitor experiences, brands, particularly museums, and live entertainment. They're brilliant people for design-led storytelling. And in particular, what they've been working on is what we call our immersive maps. So the project part that David's been talking about is going to be about taking people from their local libraries, where we'll be running events, and into the streets around your local town to experience history where it happened. ISO Design are working with us on a part of the project that takes people from the streets and brings them into the local library and makes that part of an immersive, interactive experience that builds a dialogue between the past and the present. You'll be out capturing new stories, contemporary history from people in your town today, and turning them into amazing emotional maps of the city that retell your city's geography through contemporary eyes. One of the key things about this part of the project is we're looking for people with great audio storytelling capabilities. We're looking for people who can go out and talk to people on the street, collect stories, and then we'll help you turn them into these amazing maps I'm going to show you. So the brief for this part of the project is our story mappers will create workshops and interviews working with people across the town, and we're looking for them to collect and curate diverse and unusual stories. These will then be presented back via a UK tour in a pop-up civic library spaces that involves a large immersive installation with a great big curved screen that will surround people with these stories, as well as interactive kiosks where people can find and explore individual stories. And one of the brilliant things about this is that audiences do not need a device. They can turn up, they don't need to be engaged with any device. They can turn up and see big accessible screens that will immerse them in their town's contemporary history, remixed again with archive from the British Film Institute and the BBC. This part of the project, one of the really exciting things is you're going to be mixing great audio storytelling with the new technologies of scanning. And as part of the heart of this, we're trying to put sort of democratized tools into your creative hands and the hands of people in your town to reshape what your town looks like through these scanning technologies. And that includes capturing scans of people in the community themselves. So we'll be offering you sort of a sense of creating your own 3D avatar and then attaching really interesting and unusual stories to it and placing those into your town in a way that makes the town look entirely different. So here we have some early captures of what this scanning process looks like. In the top left, you've got a scan of a person, and then sort of building blocks, building this into a street scene where the person then is connected to the letterbox. The letterbox is then part of a street scene, and that street scene growing. And these are all captured via the handheld mobile devices that you'll be given and trained how to scan in. And what we're looking to do is how these suggest new stories about what your town is and how we experience it. So what are the stories behind the guy in the mask in this situation, and how do we build it into a block of the overall town? We'll be putting these avatars that you collect into psychic geographies of your town that reimagine what it looks like and then place kind of like British Film Institute and BBC archive footage into that townscape. So we build together a kind of like a weird and wonderful experience of the town seen through your own lens. We're experimenting, just as David's talked about, we're experimenting with different ways of presenting the archive as part of this interactive map. So we might place it as part of televisions, out on the street, inside people's kind of like homes, around key bits of architecture in the city, and building these beautiful kind of storyscapes of our towns. This is an early working version of ideas of what Blackpool might look like, taken through the lens of a series of scans that combine large emotional objects with people's stories. I'm going to show you a quick example from the early work that we've been doing, just to give you a sense of how this might work.
My name's Adam Pope, and when I moved to Lewisham, I made it my target to run every street in the borough. And I bought a big map, which I traced all my routes on. I'll be honest, it became an absolute obsession, and I was trying to squeeze in runs whenever I could. I think I probably ran about 400 miles. It just opened my eyes to what a place like Lewisham has to offer. When I came, I just thought it would be another part of London, maybe a bit built up, a bit noisy, a bit dirty, but I've actually discovered it's a really beautiful place. Found that there was enablingness everywhere. I ran through some parts of Sydenham at night, which I've been told wasn't a great place to run around. It had a certain reputation, but I never felt in danger. I never felt there was any trouble. I could go anywhere in Lewisham and I'd know my way back, which is good. When I revisit places that I've run, I feel like I know those places because my feet have touched the floor there, I've breathed the air there, I've noticed the little things like the trees, the flowers. If you can get out and be immersed in surroundings, it sticks with you and you just feel like it's part of you and you're part of that. And I've certainly felt that it's helped me settle here in Lewisham.
I'll leave it there. This gives you a sense of the sorts of things that we're looking for, of creating a new emotional connection to your town. And I'm going to hand back over to Rebecca Frankel for teeing up our Q&A session. Thanks, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to give you a quick overview of like what the scheme is and how it works, which is hopefully going to answer some of your questions. And then we will go through and make sure that we've answered everything. So the way this project works is there's 15 locations across the UK that have been chosen. They haven't been selected by us. They've been selected in consultation with part of Unboxed, which is a big cultural festival happening next year. So that's why, for example, we've got 2 London boroughs, but we've got 2 locations in Scotland, and they've tried to get a spread. So we're in Dundee and Dumfries rather than Edinburgh and Glasgow, and we're in some smaller places and not just all big towns. So that's how the locations were selected. And in each of the 15 locations, we're going to put 2 people. So one person is going to be working on what David was talking about, which is the AR trail. So that will be more involved with finding history stories in the place and using archive to put together narrative-led adventures that people will use their mobile phone to interact and engage with. And then the second strand, which James just showed you the image for, will be looking at what stories and people we often don't hear from, and it will be going to interview those people and then using the new iPhone technology with the LiDAR scanner to scan those people. So for all of these strands, we do not assume you've got any prior experience with immersive technology, and there will be training given. Before you start, there's like a 10-day training program where you're taught about immersive technology and different history angles and how to use archive. So you will be trained up. What we're looking for is storytellers and people who are interested in thinking critically about how stories are told and engaging with communities to tell stories that don't often get told. So I'm just answering a couple of questions I've already read. You don't have to come to this with the story you want to tell in the place already. What we're looking for is people who understand what makes good stories, and it is obviously an amazing asset if you've got deep connections to a place and know what stories are good. But equally, you might be somebody who's really passionate and experienced at engaging with communities to tell stories from the communities. So we can work it both ways. So I'm gonna, James, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm gonna start just going through some of the questions and answering them. So is this paid? Yes. The way this works is it's £15,000 compensation. The reason I say that is it is that includes your expenses while you're doing this project. And the way it works is there's training at the beginning, then there's 10 weeks full-time production work where you are expected to be in the location, to be doing the interviews. And then it's 10 weeks part-time work, which is to do pickups or get any extra footage as the maps and AR installations are being put together. So it works out, it's like much higher than minimum wage, and it kind of, we've just got flexibility built in case you do need to do pickup stuff. You don't need to already have access to the communities. There are specific themes that we're looking at the project level, but they're quite broad themes. They're things like celebration and tapping into different communities. And so the way it works is it'll be up to you when you're in the community, and we will give you packs. We've already working with a range of history students to create packs, so you'll be able to see this is the makeup of who lives in the towns, these are the famous people, the famous stories, and there'll be a collaborative process to work out which stories should be told. James, I'm going to pass on the copyright question to you. Do you want to answer that? Who owns the copyright of what's created?
So the copyright will be licensed to be part of the story trails format, but the people creating the stories will ultimately own that story for exploitation elsewhere. So it's kind of like it's a shared copyright scenario, where the story trails project will have a license for it to use a story trails format, but the people who've written the story will own it for exploitation on other media.
Probably is worth mentioning about the exhibition plans. So I mentioned there's 15 locations that have been picked, and next summer there's going to be a tour across the UK in those 15 locations. And the key audience we're making this for is to go back into those communities and reflect their own stories back to them. So we'll be going to the libraries and putting up big screens and doing the AR trails there. And that's hopefully going to be the beginning of the journey of these. So that kind of links into the copyright question. There's not big plans to kind of, really exploit these in loads of different ways, but the goal is really to take these stories out to lots of people if we can.
I'll take the next couple of questions. So anonymous attendee asks, is there any technical skill requirements? Will applicants need to be familiar with particular software suites? So the two project outputs that we've talked through have different kinds of technical skill requirements. The maps, we're looking for people who do have some audio skills. They do not have to be at the highest level, but we do need people who are able to tell an audio story and be able to work with, not looking for a specific technology set that you can work with. It could be that you've done audio stories through Logic Pro, could be through the Adobe suite, it could be through even something like a podcasting tool. So, but we are looking for, particularly on that one, some audio skills are preferential, but immersive technology skills we are not looking for. We are very much looking for people to be coming with storytelling skills that we can then build into this space. So will applicants need to be familiar with particular software suites? No, but you will need to be adept at learning the digital software suite. And if I take Abigail's question as well, why are there only certain boroughs you can connect stories with, i.e. Lewisham? I think Rebecca's already answered this. But essentially, we are part of Unbox Creativity in the UK. We have been commissioned to work in 15 locations. That's been a careful process of mapping those locations against the whole of the Unbox program and against culturally underserved cold spots in the UK. That is why we only have 15 locations. And I think there are a number of other questions about why isn't X chosen or Y chosen. These 15 locations have been chosen as part of the commission with Unbox UK and as part of a mapping process for cultural cold spots. So shall I'll answer Keith Klopp's question and hand back to you, Rebecca. So Keith, is there a time period we should be thinking about? So we are using BBC and BFI archive. That does limit our time period to the modern era. In particular, the archive becomes richer the nearer you get in history. But we do have moving image archive from essentially 1901 as available, but that moving image archive gets more rich, particularly as you move through the 50s, 60s, 70s. So we are looking for contemporary stories, and we are looking for history as a form of nostalgia that makes people connect back to their past. And back to you, Rebecca.
Do you want to answer the next question?
Cool.
It's your favorite.
David Olashoga is the executive producer of Story Trails, and he will be creating a film as part of the Story Trails project that will sit alongside these immersive experiences and be part of making sure our history program of learning how to teach history and be part of making history happen is all kind of like within our ethos. But most importantly, David's role here is that we're doing a program of developing 50 diverse emerging creatives as part of a response to how we look at our creative industries to ensure that they reflect the diversity that we want to see in those industries. So that is David's role, and people on the program will see him at different points in the training and development process.
I'm actually just going to point out now that we've actually got another call out open, and you are all welcome to apply to both of them. So this call out, which closes on Monday, is to be a creative practitioner. So you're in the field and you are collecting and making material. But we also have a partner placement scheme where you are placed with one of the partners. So the two technical partners, ISO and Nexus, and David's production company. And David's production company are actually looking for a archive researcher or AP. And that's more of a role where you're sitting in a company and you get mentoring. But I would very much recommend that everybody looks at applying to both schemes, because there's a big range of roles available on the partner placements. And I'll make sure that link gets put in the chat now. I'm going to go back to answering the questions. Iman asks, does this project offer any professional credits? Yes, you'll get a producer credit on your piece. So that's something you can put on your CV. Do practitioners receive an end of project documentation for their portfolio? Well, it's a digital project. The way that people often document a digital project on a PDF is to take screen grabs or things like that, or output a video. So yeah, we're not planning to produce a book per se for you, but we'd be very happy to answer questions about how to document digital work. Yeah, we want to give people the whole point of this scheme, why we're interested in it. StoryFutures. StoryFutures trains people who come from media, TV, linear storytelling to think about the possibilities with new technology and how that impacts storytelling. So for us, the dream would be for the people who take part in this or interact with us, that it just widens your mindset about what you think is possible with storytelling. So that's what we're exactly interested in, is potential and possibilities to realize new ideas. That's Tessa's question. Helen's asking, what about where they're missing people and stories from the archives? And that's a really good question, because it's really important to look critically at what is and isn't documented in archives. And that's why we're doing the strand with ISO and the scanning with the phones, because it is quite biased and disproportionate which stories get represented. And we want to look at remifying that in some ways by speaking to lesser heard from communities and scanning them to put them on the map. Engagement in the project, should you be accepted? So you need to apply by Monday, coming up this week, 1 week's time. We will then be shortlisting in a complicated process and interviewing in early December. And the way it works is we're splitting the groups into two, which is based on the locations. The first group will start in the beginning of January. So they will get training for the first 2 weeks, and then they will go off and do their 10 weeks full-time production and their 10 weeks part-time production. The second lot, which is the more southerly locations, will do their training in March. So they will lag behind about 11 weeks, I think. All of the details and all of the dates are on, if you go to the website, there is a PDF called Frequently Asked Questions. All of the dates for all of the workshops, interviews, everything is on there.
Shared that link in both the chat and in typed answers. So all those kind of details are there.
Okay. Then we've got a question about how are we going to select our candidates based on the fact that creators are new to technology and the ideas might not have been developed. So when you submit the application, it's quite a quick application. It really asks you for your CV. And what we're asking for, this is not for new entrants. We're asking for people with a couple of years experience. So you don't need to be a young creative. You just need to be someone who's got some experience of working on storytelling projects. So what we're going to be looking for is, have you got that relevant level and transferable skills in storytelling? And then we're going to be looking at whether this scheme will benefit you in some way. We're really looking to offer personal mentoring and career development support and help give people almost a leg up who might not go on lots of placement schemes. So we're really just going to be assessing your storytelling ability, your ability to benefit from being on this scheme. And then it would be beneficial if you did have a connection to the place, but that's not essential. You can demonstrate an ability to tell community stories as well, but that's the 3 criteria. Claire is asking, will the story gathering be done at workshops? People elect to attend on the street, cold calling, or more like market research? It will be done in lots of different ways. We have got a partnership with all of the libraries across the UK. So we'll be using the libraries as a hub point for conducting focus groups and doing interviews. But you might also be doing vox pops in the park. You might also elect to work with a local historian who'll introduce you to somebody. And if there's a story you want to tell, you might end up paying to get a list of 3 highly specialized people who were very important in something. So it depends what the stories are, who the people are, but it is not prescriptive how you'll be doing it. You'll have some autonomy and you'll also have support. We've got 4 producers in-house who are going to be working on the ground with you and helping you, so they can discuss how you're finding people, how to develop that story, and be upskilling you as we go along. Does the project include budget for devices that people can borrow from the library rather than just rely on the audience to have their own smart device? At the point of people, for exhibition purposes, at the other end next summer, I think that we will be trying to find devices to make this project more accessible.
Yeah, this project, you can experience this project regardless of whether you have a smart device or not. So one of the exciting parts will be making immersive technologies accessible for everybody. You can turn up to your local library and get immersed in history, whether you've got the latest smartphone or you don't have a phone at all. So it's really not reliant on that. So really key part of the project. So it's just looking a couple of questions.
We've got another question about the fee, which is slightly confusing. So I'm just going to reiterate. Essentially, when we started talking about this, we wanted to have a really good day rate, but your expenses are included in it. So if you live in the place, you don't have to pay for travel and accommodation. However, we don't want to make this scheme not available to people who don't currently live in the place. But it does mean that your travel and accommodation to take part then needs to come out of that fee. So the £15,000 is the total that you will be given, but that includes your kind of living costs during that time. We're not paying you to go off on location, but we don't want to put people off applying if they used to live somewhere and they've got stories they want to tell. So it's a little bit complicated to explain how that fee works, but yeah, it's a total fee for basically your time during that period. In terms of approaching members of the public, will there be communications beforehand? Yeah, we're working with BBC, lots of local media. I think we heard today when the press announcement went out about this project, it's been in local press for 14 out of the 15 locations already. So people hopefully will sort of know about it, and we'll give you training in things like release forms. So you'll be fully equipped to land on the ground. I'm going to ask one more and then hand over to you. 3 years of media practitioner experience. It doesn't have to be in a professional working environment. Self-created work does count. So you might have been a student who ran a podcast. You might have been working with a theatre company, writing, narratives with them in a part-time capacity over a while. We're looking to engage with a really diverse selection of people, and we are looking at a very wide range of storytelling and practical experiences. What we really want is people who are excited to develop themselves and to learn new skills related to new types of technology, which is going to widen the ways that people can tell stories.
As we make clear in the FAQs, we want to take a flexible approach to how you might have gained that 3 years of professional experience, but this is not a new entrant scheme. Okay, so this is not a first job or early career scheme. This is a scheme that will be demanding to deliver, and you need to have professional experience of working on media production in order to be able to make this work. This is a program that will enable you to gain that production credit, be part of a national moment of media attention, and develop your career to a next level, or translate your skills from one industry into immersive. So that's why there is that 3-year threshold that we're looking for. So I'll pick up the questions from there. My thing just like
you go from Chella.
Chella, thank you. Is this completely self-managed, including admin, or is there admin support provided? Essentially, we have an admin team and we have producers, as Rebecca was talking about, to help you work with it. So you'll be given a format to work with, you'll be given a lot of support. You will have to manage some admin yourself, but there is a great deal of support with the program. Brave, bold drama. How are you ensuring in this project that community participants who provide stories are empowered and not appropriately included in their participation, not simply exploited for other people's gains? I mean, that's why we are really looking to work with people who are coming from those communities to tell stories that they want to share as part of those communities. This is a public arts celebration year for sort of celebrating that diversity. So we are really looking for creating an open, optimistic, engaging, dialogic program with the community. How do we do that? By selecting people who come from those places with strong connections from those places to ensure that we're telling stories that represent those places as part of it. So that'll be a key thing. As part of it, we obviously have a bunch of archive, but we also have budget to where appropriate, pay for contributor fees and those kind of things. So it's an important kind of like part of why people tell stories and understanding where we can help facilitate those stories. Anonymous attendee, how are pairs organised by yourselves? No, we select the pairs as part of the interview process, and you'll be working closely together. But also, you each will have your own independent work stream to deliver.
But just to clarify that, when you apply, you just apply not for a particular strand. And then in the interview process, if you've got a preference, it would be great if that came out. And we will be looking, they demand slightly different skills. So it's going to be a very complicated juggling act because some of the locations will have more applications. Yeah, so we're going to be balancing a lot of factors.
Anonymous attendee, question number 3. When are these stories released for the public? Next summer, we'll be on a tour starting at the top of the country in Northern Ireland and winding our way down through to London at the end of the summer. The dates are still being finalised, but early summer through till middle of September. Rob Harris, and would this be multiple stories around different themes? Yes, we're looking for more than one story in each location. We'll be building more than one AR trail, and we'll be building more than one story on each local map. So lots of different stories, particularly the maps. We want to be as rich with the community voice as possible. Nick Maddox. Presumably you'll need to know that archive exists before deciding on a potential story. Nick, you've hit the nail right on the head. That is exactly right. You'll need to know. So we are doing a load of work at the moment in curating the archive for you, so that when you join, you're not just given, hey, ta-da, there's the archive, go and find anything you can possibly find. We've been working really tirelessly to curate archive into both locations, so it's linked to locations, and also I think there have been a few questions on this, into some themes that we're really interested in the project exploring, around celebration, around migration and race, around health, around sustainability, technology, work, and how we live and love together. So these kind of themes will be part of our curated archive that will be provided for people. Rebecca, you're typing an answer, so that's cool.
It's only because we already actually answered it. I'm going to answer a few questions from the bottom because they relate to what we're talking about. To summarize, the skills we're looking for each strand. The skills are broadly speaking quite similar, but the difference is the AR one is more about a narrative story. You're following in the footsteps of something that happened. So if you've got a higher level of experience dealing with structuring a story, done script editing or writing theatre, that would be quite a good one to do. And also that will be more editing video. The AR trail one is probably more suited to people who may have done something like radio or documentary film or work in the community, because you are going to be out talking to people you don't know. Now, they both involve both, because the AR trail, you're still going to be interviewing people you don't know and recording it. And on the immersive map, you are still going to be using archive, but it's a slightly different disposition about whether you feel comfortable to be off talking to people you don't know for the majority of the time, or if you prefer to be going through archive video to construct narrative and supplement that with additional interviews. So that's the answer on that. How much audio do you want per story? For the ISO one in the pilot, we worked out about 2 to 3 minutes was good. The ISO ones are more stories and they're shorter nuggets. The training is just outside London. The training is happening in Egham at the university, but the training is funded separately from this money, as in we will sort out accommodation and food and pay for your travel. And some of that's remote and some of it's in person. But we thought it'd be really nice to get together in person at the start. Is access funding available for participants? I am not exactly sure what you mean by the word access funding, but we are happy to speak to people who have got particular reasons why they might need additional funding or additional structures and adjustments put into place for how their actual placement works. Okay, this is questions come up a lot about whether you can apply as 2 people or not. For the sake of invoicing on this project, you need to be a named single freelancer. So you cannot apply as a duo and invoice as a joint company. If you decide that you are working with somebody and there's a particular reason, because you often work together and you share caring responsibilities and other things, and you're happy to talk to us about that, and you're happy to have one person invoice, there's nothing to stop you applying. But the invoice structure is set up that it goes to a single person as a single freelancer rather than to a company. do you want to take over?
Yeah, sure.
James?
So Helen Goodbarton writes, once we've completed the tech training, will we still have a support person for any questions and queries you might come across? Yes, you will have producers working with you closely on the ground. So you will have access to both producers and executive producers, as well as the team from ISO Design and Nexus to work with. So you'll get plenty of support. Would we need to seek permission from those who appear in the archive videos, especially if local celebrities or public figures, from anonymous attendee at 1741? Another really great question about the archive and what the complexities of the archive are. So our partnership with the BBC and the BFI means we have access to wholly cleared archive that is owned by those archives. That is where we want to base most of our story work, but we've also been curating archive in which we know who the third-party rights holders are and roughly how much it will cost. And there is an archive clearance budget for people in the team, in the project, to apply to use that to make your project come to life more. So you'll have essentially a free bucket of archive, and then archive where we know it's going to cost some money, but we have budget put aside to make that happen. So we're really excited to try and make history come to life and bring those archives to life in new ways and provide as much diversity as possible within the archive. Bronwyn asks, are the visuals set or can we go for a different look? Bronwyn, we're working with those visuals. There'll be a chance to put some of your own imprint on it and ask for the ways in which some of that is rendered, but we're working to a format of the Story Trails format. So the way in which that scanning maps look is how we'll be looking to make these maps work, and the visuals that you've seen from David at Nexus will be developed, and there'll be an ability to offer some feedback and kind of like help inform the process, but you won't be able to come for an entirely different look. Pamela Glinton-Camp, does having more than a couple of years storytelling archival experience disqualify an applicant if applicant interested in expanding skills to new technologies? No, we are looking for people who are essentially, have got that 3 years of experience and are looking to upskill and tell us about what the opportunity means to you and why it's a career development and training opportunity. So we are really looking for how people see this. It is a training and development opportunity to take your career to a new level, but with the added bonus of getting a really clear production credit, being part of a national festival and delivering a really compelling piece of work that thousands of people are going to see. So it's a live training and development project. And that's what we're really excited about, because it's about making a difference in the creative industries and creative careers. Moving on. Where are we at? You mentioned, okay, anonymous attendee. You mentioned you want those who are not currently representing creative industries to apply. Do you have reasonable adjustment as part of the training for those with, e.g. dyslexia? We'll be looking to make reasonable adjustments, anonymous attendee. I think that's a question that's come up a few times. So yes, we're looking at reasonable adjustments. There is a deliverable to be made. And one of the things to talk about there is that the project does involve having to go around those towns and scan them and go physically across different parts of those towns and engage with community members in a range of different scenarios. So that is out on the street. It means moving around the town. It means covering quite a lot of distance on the town over the period that you're producing. It means being able to work physically with the equipment. So there are a number of reasonable adjustments that we can make, but we also have a delivery that we're looking to create as part of the project.
But yeah, we're looking to balance. We don't want, when we review the applications are reviewed blind by judges. So if you have got a disability or you've got something you want to declare, which would affect your ability to work. I've had some people call me and tell me they're dyslexic, or they've got chronic fatigue, or they've got caring duties. That will not impact whether we would select you. And if we do select you, we will then look at how we can tailor what the time frames or the methodology for working so it works with you. And all of the training will be looking to deliver it in multiple ways. So if you learn in different ways, you'll be able to absorb and listen and get things repeated. I'm going to zoom through a few questions quite quickly because we really want to answer all of them, but we have only got half an hour left. In terms of the dates, lots of people are asking about it. If you go to the website, there is a Q&A and a frequently asked questions with all of the dates. I suggest you look there. As I've said, applications close on Monday, then the interviews are at the beginning of December, and the training starts in the beginning of January for half the locations and in March for the second half of the locations. So it depends which location you are. So I'm going to mark that question as done when I've just done, because I've just done it. So if you apply on Monday, it's quite complicated to judge these. Are we getting them judged blind by two different people, then cross-referenced? So you will find out, I think you'd find out at the end of November if you've been shortlisted for an interview, and an interview would be the next process. If I want to work with another underrepresented, can I attach someone else? I don't know quite what you mean. You can't submit an application and say you definitely want to work with somebody else, or you definitely want to work with a story. We will be in the interviewing question. In the interview stage, we'll be asking you questions about what stories you want to tell. So it's definitely great to have ideas about that, but you will not be accepted on this scheme with the promise that you can 100% do a particular story, because you'll be working as part of a team. Do you see the 10 weeks full-time as being 9 to 5? In some ways, yes, it's being scheduled like that. But my background's from documentary and observational documentary, which is hanging out in communities, and you might find it's much more fruitful at the weekend or in the evenings. So there will be some autonomy for you about how you do your work. I guess what we're just saying is there's an intense production period to meet the people and gather all the data, and then it goes off to our partners to start assembling, and then they will feed back and you'll be getting more stuff. So it will be part-time. Madeline's asking about when Northern Ireland starts. Can we just post the dates in the chat, please, Laura or Ikra, about the dates and how the locations are split up for the training, so people can just see. I'm a very mobile freelancer. Would it be possible to commute to the chosen cities? Yes, it would, if that's your choice. We will need to see evidence you've either got a connection to that place or an ability to tell community stories and engage with people where you're not from. This project, I don't know if this will be repeated in the future, to be honest. This is the biggest history project, public history project probably ever, and this is going to be the biggest culture project next year. So StoryFutures often does immersive things, but I don't imagine it will have such reach across the UK and have so many partners. Again, it's quite a special project. Are we able to list the themes in the chat? I can't remember what the 6 themes are, but James.
Yeah, I'll list them in the chat.
Catherine, I don't know how many stories are going to be gathered for the map strand. It a little bit depends on how intense the scanning is, but maybe say 10, 20, 30 stories. It depends how we structure it and what communities we get access to. Will there be the possibility to work on a story we bring and archives we've already developed? Possibly, but don't count on it. In terms of, you will not get a place and be guaranteed that you can work on your thing you've already been researching. If, however, you've got deep connections to a community and you apply to be part of that location, and it's a great story and it's one that people would have chosen anyway, it's likely it might get wrapped up. But the way that we're contracting this whole project is, because there's so many partners, you will be picked as a person to play a role on the wider project. So we won't be able to amend your contract to say you'll definitely be able to do that. But if it fits, in all likelihood, it's very likely that would be possible. Someone's asked about the town centres or the peripheral / surrounding areas. For the AR trail, you need to kind of be able to walk around that area. Now, it might be that 1 or 2 elements of the story are from outside. So I would say the AR trail probably is more centered on the center of town, but the scanning and immersive map, because that map is like, it's bigger and, you know, it's a psychogeographical map. It's like an emotional map. And it, you know, it might be a thing where you're like zoomed in right on the center and then you zoom right out and you look at contrasting stories. So we're trying to be flexible. It depends what stories are good. We don't want to make the format so tight that we miss out good stuff, but this is quite a complicated project and the formats are somewhat developed already. How does the creative journey go in terms of post-productions? How many rough cuts will be shown before signing off? How many producers and executives will be involved? This is different to linear storytelling in a TV process where you create an edit, you get people, they give feedback. In traditional sign-off, you show it to people and then the hierarchy of people who sees it goes up and then you sign it off. Because this is digital, we try and use a much more of an iterative approach where there's more to and fro and you're building as you go. So I couldn't give you a number, but that is why we've got that part-time production process built in, so there can be like a to and a fro with the with ISO and Nexus, I guess you'd call them our technical delivery process partners. So there is a to and a fro, but I can't tell you exactly how many sign-off points. The purpose about asking about barriers regarded for personal development. What we're keen to find out is have people face barriers in their life for reasons which are related to perhaps where they come from or any conditions which relate to time constraints. We're really aware that a lot of schemes are focused on people who perhaps are in London or can afford to do something that's not paid. And we're really keen that we are helping people from across the UK and from people who might have a variety of reasons why they've not been able to access particular training before. But equally, we're really keen to hear from people who are really resilient and able to juggle lots of things. So we're really keen to hear from people who may have practiced media for a few years and then maybe they went off and they did something else, or they had kids, or they moved, or they had caring responsibilities, and now they want to come back in. So that's why we were asking, is there an editorial voice for storytelling that's been discussed or set? In some ways, it's a bit dependent on the location. There is an editorial voice that comes from StoryFutures. StoryFutures is part of a university, and the editorial voice more comes from the history hub. So it's quite a critical, almost academic history, as opposed to a sort of sensational TV approach, but it's very collaborative and it will be in dialogue. It seems the interview date is less than a month before the start date. How would you accommodate a candidate that's already in work and would need to provide 1 month's notice upon finding out they'd been offered the role? Well, that's why we're publicising all of the dates now. And if you are really keen to do this and you think you'd be in that first training cohort that starts in Jan, that's from Eloise Cummings, very happy to have a chat with you about that. Yeah, it's very difficult to schedule everything, and I'm happy to have a chat with you. How will your diversity policies manifest in the selection process? We've got a very stringent policy. All of the applications are looked at blind by the judges, as in none of the information that's collected for reporting purposes is shared with them. And then we get multiple judges read all the applications and they rank them in different order, and then different impartial people look at an overview of what have been submitted. And there's quite a complicated process of cross-checking to make sure that we are not being discriminatory and that we are promoting the people that we want to, which means that if we've got two equally skilled people and somebody has had a lot of barriers or has had a disability or is from a group that's underrepresented in the wider media, we would make efforts to make sure they would definitely get an interview. How do we show you past work within the application process? There's just a question where you talk about what your past work is. You don't have to submit a big, we don't ask for a show reel in the application. We just ask for links. Yeah, you can link you can click more than one location. So you could click all three if you've got some kind of connection to all three and you'd be happy to do all three. In that case, we would be, assessing you for all of those different locations. I might pass over to you actually now.
You're asking a lot of questions, a lot of good questions. It's really great. There's so many of you. It's really awesome. Pat Livingston, how important is sound? Uses of music. Sound is super important, Pat. Uses of music is going to be complicated, as you would expect. There'll be license issues with it, but it's something that we're working through. So sound is such an important part of the immersive environment. So how important is sound? It's super important. Going to be working with you on creating the best spatial experience of both map and trail. Rosanna McGlone, if you feel that most people are unfamiliar with technology, will you be able to use it? Yes, you will. That's part of the magic of story trails, is to take this kind of unfamiliar technology and put it into the hands of both people who've never worked with it before, but most importantly, audiences who've never seen it before. And when we do that, and we do that a lot, it is magical to watch people's expression and to see this stuff come to life. So it's a really exciting project for that. Yes, there are a lot of unfamiliar technologies at this stage, but part of our aim is to make these technologies feel much more familiar and give people confidence with them, because it should be taking a scan of a person will become as simple as taking a photograph of somebody. Tracy, will the Welsh story trails be bilingual? Yes, Tracy, thank you for asking. They will. Can we report people speaking in Welsh too? I don't see why not. You can certainly do that. That'd be great. Thank you for asking. Nathan.
Sorry, I was jumping in, but I was just grouping them back with this audio thing. Someone's asked, does ability to tell an audio story refer to recording my own voice telling the story? No, it doesn't. Ability to tell an audio story means to construct a narrative using audio. I just wanted to clarify
that was a good clarification. Yes, thanks. Good question as well. Nathan, will the fee be paid in installments? Yes, it will. It'll be paid in installments. Helen Farmer, will the end products be in multiple languages? We have no, it'll not be in multiple languages, Helen. Unfortunately, the budget will not stretch to that and create 15 locations and as many experiences as we are. Anonymous attendee asks, just looking at the application form, the roles seem different to the roles we've been discussing. What is a general? I think, anonymous attendee, you're probably on the wrong application form. You're probably on our placement application, which we've spoken about a few times on this, but there is a different webinar about our placements next Tuesday. So please check which application you have applied to. Okay, let's scroll back up in time and have a look at what we haven't looked at. And Lister asked a question much earlier, what criteria we'll be using for selecting the 2 per location? We'll be looking at the 2 best people across our criteria for those locations. So we're really excited for that. And the application form, Rebecca's talked through a number of times. Pamela Guntenkamp, what are the required skills to apply to IR Storytellers as part of the project? Essentially, we're looking for great storytellers, particularly people with audio storytelling skills, as we've said, for the maps, and for people working on the trails, people with a sense of spatial audio or interactive audio. But maybe you've come from a linear background and you're really interested in applying those techniques into a new space. Storytelling is at the heart of your skill. Sorry, Rosanna, I've experienced mainly in creative print media and in fiction writing. Yes, that's totally, there's no reason why the written word doesn't translate. That is really important. So yes, you can absolutely come from a print background. Anonymous attendee, as part of a socially engaged practice, could some of the archive material be used in the community in other projects? So the answer to that is essentially archive owners decide what to license it for. They decide on a case-by-case basis. StoryTrails is a big case for which they've decided to license this material. I can't say whether the BBC or the BFI will license material to other community projects. Is training still available even if you don't get chosen to go on one of the projects? So StoryFutures Academy offers training in immersive storytelling. You can go to our website, and Ikra or Laura, if you could just drop our general StoryFutures Academy website address into the chat, you can find loads of different training opportunities in there in immersive storytelling. The StoryTrails type of training will become available later in 2022. So the short answer to your question is yes. The long answer is these are some details of how you can do it. Lucy Woods, do expenses cover technology equipment required? Yes, they do. But we do expect people to have their own laptop. If you don't have your own laptop, we will look at if you have hardship cases, we will look at those. We're looking for people, as we said, with 3 years plus experience, looking to make a difference in their creative careers, but all of that key technology we've provided.
A lot of these questions are repeating themselves. I'm just going to answer one or two where I think they're important. What kind of connection do you have to have with the location? Can it be historical? It might be you grew up there. It might be you've got family from there. It might be you had a summer holiday there with formative experiences. It might be you had a study project there. It might be whatever. There is a real wide range. It's just basically, do you have an interest in telling stories there? Or, as I said, do you tell, community stories because you work on the ground in communities and you're interested to tell stories from this place? You don't need to understand how the content will be realized in AR or immersive. That will be taught in the training. So you'll be able to visualize and understand that process. And you will be briefed about what works and what doesn't work. So we will handhold you through that process. I don't know what a biography file is. What are you looking for particular with the biography file? We ask you to upload your CV, and then the application form is quite easy. I ask you to upload your CV and just tick a box about what you've done before, what kind of media stuff. And then we just ask you to talk through some projects. So you can do it in whatever way you want. And we've designed it in such a way that it's not asking for a list of professional credits. It might be community projects or anything that you think is suitable. In terms of Margarita scanning people, that is using the new iPhone, which has got LiDAR technology, which means that you can it's like taking a picture, but it's 3D, and you can scan places. You can create people and places into 3D objects that get sent to the developer and then put into these maps. Are the archive stories intended to be presented by a storyteller or actor? On the AR trails, I think often there will be a narrator or a person, but there will be somebody connected with the story. We're really interested in how do you tell stories effectively? Who should be the person telling that story? So it might be multiple people. It's really hard to give an answer to that. But the AR trails is more of a led narrative, whereas the immersive map is much more a spread of lots of different people and it's less linear. Start and end dates for the project. So all of this is on the website. If you're in the first cohort, training starts at the beginning of Jan, and then you go for 10 weeks full-time, 10 weeks part-time. If you're on the second cohort, your training starts in the end of March.
So ASB, how long will the stories and trails be accessible to the public? At least for a couple of years. We're working on ways that we can make that longer, but we're really hopeful that, you know, the key event of the summer next year will be a moment where people can see these amazing trails, and then they'll live on in those spaces. So that'll be our intention. We've further questions about what support for people with disabilities. I think we've kind of answered that. We will make reasonable adjustments. We've talked about the application process. But we've also said, you know, it is a project that requires being out in the field, spending time on the streets in the town which you are working in. So this is an important consideration. Richard Hughes, how will sites of dissemination reflect and reach the range of communities involved in story collection? So we're working with libraries, Richard, because libraries are the most, as a cultural institution, they serve the most diverse and underserved demographics across the UK. So libraries are a site that, you know, kind of like diverse demographics access, and we'll be inviting people into those libraries. And that's the way we're working towards that range of communities at the showcase stage. During the production phase, we'll be working with you, the great people from these locations, to engage and inspire and work with those communities. We've got some very specific questions about.
I know, I'm just sending private responses.
Yeah, we feel. If there are a few questions going into the chat box, but if you could please post them in the Q&A, that'd be so helpful for us.
Because we can't feed them, so they won't get answered if they're in the chat. But everything in the Q&A will get answered. But we are wrapping up in 10 minutes. So people have asked, will this training equip us to make our own AR in the future? Well, it depends what kind of person you are. To be honest, if you're like technically savvy, you can follow a few YouTube videos and make a very easy AR app yourself. We're assuming that the people who apply for this are probably more editorial based people, and the training is not going to equip you to become a coder, but it depends on your own disposition. What we're going to be doing is like opening up your mind and imagination to what's possible. So potentially yes, but we are not promoting this as training for you to then go out and transition to become a technical person, but it's about becoming a multi-platform producer who can work with tech people.
Yeah.
So there's a few. It says, how much creative freedom will we have? It seems little, as if we're collecting info and the developers are implementing them. Just want to make sure the upskilling involves us learning how to use the creative technology creatively. Yeah, that sounds like quite a funny question. The developers, and not by themselves, through working creatively with us and other creative practitioners on various pilots, have been working out formats which give the most flexibility to the creatives on the field to be able to to input in stories. It isn't prescriptive, like you need to get this, that's that. We try to make them be responsive. Each place is going to have different kinds of stories that we want to tell. So when you say how much creative freedom we have, there is a style for the AR trails, and there is a style for the immersive maps, which have been developed over months. So you're not going to be able to go and say, I hate the look of that, I want it to look completely differently. Your creative freedom is much more around the editorial of the stories, how you find the people, what type of themes you want to have, how you want to link them together. And you'll be working collaboratively with the development partners. But this is a project where you are working in part of a team on a really big, huge project. This is probably the biggest immersive project that's ever globally that's ever happened. So this is not a scheme where we're giving you a pot of money and telling you to go off and do whatever you want in a place. So if that is what you want to be doing, this maybe isn't the scheme for you. This is a scheme where people get upskilled to work collaboratively in a team, and they'll have a lot of support and will be very open, and it will be a very inclusive and collaborative process. But certain things have been decided, like the color and the logo and what the feel is. But it's a really exciting opportunity to get access to the whole process, I think. Do we need to be in front of the camera at any point? We're not using cameras, we're using archive and we're collecting audio. And the themes and decades, all of that stuff will be decided when you're on location.
There's a lot of questions about holidays. Unfortunately, if your holidays do clash with the scheme, we can't flex the scheme. So
we can. You don't expect you to be totally available then, but the training is quite a tricky thing. If you are on holiday, there is flexibility. If you've got something pre-booked, you don't have to be completely free for half a year. But the training dates are quite key to be able to attend. So look, it's all in dialogue, isn't it? Like, as I said, it might be that you're on location and you're working weekends. You might work some of that part-time longer. So I wouldn't not apply because you've got a holiday booked, but it is quite key that you can do the training dates. When we say a computer, you can use any kind of computer. You just need something that you'll be able to upload files and send stuff on.
When people watch or interact with the finished AR trail, will they be looking at their phones on the street? Yes, they will. And they'll hear it via headphones. We will be running walking tours of the trails where we provide the technology. So that's how they'll hear it. And then the app will be free to download and accessible via people's own smartphones throughout.
Is there archive for digitizing new archive? Potentially, yes, in the production.
Sorry. It's not a digitizing of archive project. We have money for clearing archive that we haven't got in our cleared archive pot, but we won't be digitizing new archive.
Okay.
Sorry. How will the projects adapt with COVID tests and possible interruptions, JSB? What a good question. Depends what the interruption is. It's quite a lot of contingency planning, as I'm sure you can imagine. Not really possible to answer that question in this context. It really depends on what the situation is with COVID. But one of the great things about what we're producing is it can live on in multiple guises beyond the immediate period we're looking to deliver. Kate Ross, do applicants need a full PVG disclosure? Now, I think PVG is the Scottish equivalent of a DBS. We are not working with children explicitly as a focus of the programme. It is something that it's something we'll have to look into as a final decision, but this is not a program where you're definitely working with children, so it seems unlikely, but we need to take some.
Yeah, we're trying to take a tailored approach. Like, you might be working with groups that don't speak English and need a translator. That doesn't mean everybody's going to be working with a translator. You might be working on a project and it's really important that there is a lot of kids' stories who are told, in which case, obviously, we will follow guidelines to make sure that's done like safely and also in a way that elicits stories from a kind of heartfelt place. So we're trying to just keep an open mind and make decisions on an as and when basis to keep everyone safe and prioritize getting what you think we need.
Could you do something on water in a city, says Deborah? Well, there's a lot of health and safety considered. Maybe, yes, technically, possibly. It really depends. What we don't probably want to do is encourage people to think that they can walk into the water or onto the water. But nice to see your creative thinking. Yeah. Yeah, I think Evie, thank you for the DBS point. I think that's what we're saying, is we just need to look at a case-by-case basis, but it is something we just need to take some legal advice on at our end. But thank you. Okay, we are
I think we should wrap up actually. Someone's asked about the Northern Irish Trail, if it's going to be bilingual. There's not a legal requirement, as in the festival of funding the Welsh translations. They've not said they're funding the Northern Irish translations yet, but there's definitely a desire to. So hopefully, yes, but it's not legally required, is the answer. We've already said that when they finish AR trails, they're going to be looking at it on their phones. That's kind of how you see it. Do you provide professional insurance for workers? Do we have insurance?
No, people will be contracted and have to provide their own insurance as part of the project. Again, we'll have hardship funds if that becomes an issue.
Okay, so the water is Birmingham. Yep, and you canal.
Thank you, anonymous attendee. Good to know.
And we've answered the questions about barriers. It's just we really want to make sure that if people have faced barriers and have had less opportunity, that we really make sure that if they hit the minimum requirement, we'd love for them to get through to interview stage if possible.
Kate and Annalise in the chat, thanks for the lovely feedback. Always welcome. Please do take the time to read through the FAQs on the website, as to we provide as much detail there as we can. We're going to leave it there, otherwise we will be here all evening.
Yeah, well, we've answered 217 questions, so certain people keep asking questions based on whatever we say, but it feels like we've kind of wrapped up.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to wish you all good night and hope to see lots of applications from you. So, Ikra, if we can close down the webinar, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Thanks for all the thank yous, and we look forward to reading your applications.
Bye.
Bye.